Greetings and welcome to today's 10-minute painting lesson. We're going to begin here today, as we generally do, with a large damp square-headed brush. Here I'm applying a mixture of titanium white and primary blue to the base of our horizon. Then I'm going to begin blending upwards. From there, I'm going to go back to my palette, and this time I'm going to grab a similar mixture with a bit of Mars Black. This is going to darken it and also desaturate the pigment just a little bit. Then I'm blending it into our initial layer with a very soft application. This is going to ensure that we don't get a very streaky brush stroke or final aesthetic on the painting. It'll be nice and smooth. Then, yet again, I'm going to go back to my palette, this time grabbing a mixture of primary blue and Mars Black. It's void of the titanium white to ensure that it just gets darker, and yet again we're going to continue our gradient by blending this into our previous layers with a very soft application. By using a fairly damp brush here, we're ensuring that we extend the wet life of our paint so we can blend a little bit longer, and we're also ensuring that the paint can glide across the canvas with more ease. Then I'm going down to the water where I'm applying the initial blue that we applied to the base closest to the city, and then from there I'm taking that darker pigment that we applied to the top of the sky, I'm applying that to the bottom of the water, and I'm blending the two together yet again. However, this time I'm using the smaller side of that square-headed brush just to give it a little bit of line work and movement so it looks like the water isn't completely still. Then I'm taking that same brush and I'm going to block in the bottom of our city here, as you can see. This is going to be done predominantly with square brush strokes, and as you can see, it's going to be higher when we get towards the middle of the city. And I'm doing this purposefully so that the eye goes towards the middle of the city and so that it has a focusing point on the city. If we were to make all of the buildings the same height, the city would be fairly mundane and there wouldn't be a place to rest your eyes on. It wouldn't be a captivating subject. So here we're ensuring that the middle is the tallest, and then as we move out to the right and the left hand side, it just progressively gets smaller and smaller. It's also worth noting that we've now switched over to the smaller square-headed brush, and we're doing this for a couple of reasons. The first being, it's fantastic for detail work. It's small, it's defined, we can work around really nice, intricate pieces. However, it can also still hold a good amount of paint because it is in the square shape, and it does have very sharp edges, which means by going up to the top of the mountain or going up to the top of the building and dragging down, we essentially render a full building, and it's a very quick and easy way of going about this. You could switch your brush to get different types of buildings as well. However, I'm finding that I can just kind of extend them. I can drag the paint out a little bit farther, or I can amalgamate them as you can see here. The goal here is to ensure that the city is always evolving, that the sets of buildings are always different, that the heights are always different, that the clusters of them are always different. We want this to look very natural looking, and we're doing that very simply by altering the heights and the widths of each. Now from there, I'm taking a little bit of black, it's very watered down, and I'm going to begin working in some reflections in the water. I'm doing this generally by initially moving the paint down, and then I'll work in a horizontal pattern, moving it out so it looks like it's kind of rippling within the water. And this is going to give it a really nice, smooth effect here. So, as you can see, we're just moving our way across the city, and we're just giving it that calm reflection. We don't want it to be too stark, we don't want it to be too soft, we're really looking for something in the middle. And by incorporating a good amount of water in this, we're ensuring that that happens. So once I'm fairly happy with that, I'm going to go back to my medium-sized square-headed brush, and I'm going to begin working in the trees to the far left-hand side of the painting. I'm using a very dark green for this. It is a mixture of a primary yellow, a primary blue, and a good amount of a Mars Black as well. I'm initially just working on this fairly flat surface, and then we'll go back in later, we'll add the depth, and we'll add the snow. But we're essentially just building the foundation foundation to work on top of. We're sketching it out, we're finding out exactly where we want it to be, and then once we have it proportionally the way we want it, then we can go in and add the details. It's a much easier way of painting than trying to paint all of the details at once from the start, because if we were to try to do that and the proportioning was off at the end, it would be a lot to fix, whereas by doing it in this manner, you can kind of get all of that really heavy lifting done from the start, so when you add on the detail, you know it is just right. I'm also adding a second smaller tree over to the left-hand side of it, just to give it a little bit of scale, to make it a little bit more interesting and dynamic as well. Now, from there, we're actually going to switch over to our smaller round-headed brush. I'm grabbing a brighter mixture that we used at the bottom of our horizon, and I'm just kind of applying a place that I want to be illuminated in the sky. Some light that's being emitted from here. So I'm applying a blue, then I'm watering down my brush, and in a circular motion, I'm softening the edges so we get this really smooth gradient coming out from the middle. Then I'm taking that same brush and I'm going to begin working in a little bit of a moon. I'm using a pure titanium white for this. However, because the sky is already quite blue, it's going to blend with that initial application and we won't get the pure white that we want at this point. However, we are putting down that foundation, so once it dries we can go back and then we can incorporate that moon properly. From there, I'm grabbing a little bit of a primary yellow with our titanium white, and I'm applying some lights down to the bottom of the city. Perhaps these are from street lights or cars or lights around a dock. It doesn't really matter, but they're adding a little bit of warmth and a little bit of light to the painting itself. Then I'm dragging down a very small semi-transparent reflection from each of the lights into the water. This is generally best achieved by using a little bit of water on your brush itself. So it's starting to look quite nice, and when we were doing the smaller lights, the top had a good time to dry. So now I'm going back up to the top with my smaller square-headed brush, as it has a very defined edge, and I'm reworking on some of the moon here, just giving it much more of a shape. Then I'm going to begin starting to incorporate a little bit of snow in the sky as well. So I'm doing this with a tapping motion, and there are much quicker, much more efficient ways of applying a lot of snow, but I wanted this to be fairly subtle. I didn't want too much, I didn't want it to be very small. I just wanted some regular size snow in the sky. So I'm doing this by using a tapping effect. I'm trying to alter my application each time, the amount of pressure I'm applying, so that some are slightly larger and some are slightly smaller than others. It's also going to make some slightly more transparent. Here you can see that I'm throwing in some really small applications to match with the larger pieces of snow, and this is just going to interject a little bit of depth into the sky, as you can see here. I'm also trying to ensure that it's fairly well balanced and that one area isn't really without the application. Then I'm going to switch back over to my smaller square-headed brush, and I'm going to apply some snow to the tops of my trees. Now, this is a really fun process. It's a very cathartic process. You're kind of just coloring in areas with snow. And what I generally like to do is at the top of the tree, I begin on the tops of the branches. However, as we get lower and lower in the tree, I begin at the edge of the branch and then I'll blend upwards, because the top of each branch will be covered by the branch above it and it won't be receiving any snow or light. So, it's really important that you kind of gradually build up the snow from the bottom of the branch rather than starting from the top. So here you can see that I'm doing just that, and I'm also using a bit of a blending process to do so as well. So it gets softer and softer and creates a little bit of a gradient as we move upwards. The snow gets more heavy and thick as we get to the edge of the branch, because there's simply more snow that can fall in that area because it doesn't have any disruptions. I'm trying to ensure that these snow patterns are fairly similar, but they're also altering and different. We don't want two areas to look exactly the same. This isn't man-made, it's snow that's falling on a very natural tree, and it's important that we keep that very natural aesthetic as well. I'm doing so with the tree in the background as well, but I'm doing so more with a little bit of a tapping effect just because of the sizing of the tree. When you're using a much smaller tree, generally it's best to apply the snow with a tapping application on the same angle as the branch itself. So from there, I'm going back in, I'm applying a little bit of additional titanium white to the edges of all of those applications, just because acrylics are so transparent. With that said, that is essentially our 10-minute version of the painting, but as per usual, I had a couple of additional ideas, and I thought I'd share them with you to kind of help you out and maybe elaborate on your painting. So from there, I added a little bit of a glow to the outside of the moon, I added some white to fix it up, and I began throwing in some out of focus snow. And we do this by applying a very watery white to the canvas and then blending it out with our finger. It makes this much larger, much more transparent application that looks like the snow is very close to us and it's out of focus. Then I'm taking an old square-headed brush, some primary red, and I'm applying some tinsel to these trees, as you can see here. Then I'm taking some additional applications, applying them because it is transparent, taking some titanium white, applying that on top to give it a bit of a sheen. Then I'm adding some little ornaments with a yellow, a gold would also work fantastic, and I'm applying some additional highlights into the snow as well, which is falling. But with all of that being said, that is our 10 to 11-ish minute painting. I truly hope you've enjoyed. I hope you feel like you've learned something. If you'd like to learn more, there is a link in the description to my ebook, Acrylics for Beginners. It is 30% off until the end of this year. And if you'd like hour-long lessons just like this, where I also show you my color palettes, when we're mixing paints, all of the things we don't have time for, there is a link in the description to that. We have some winter paintings up on there, and we have just a litany of other paintings as well. It's a full library. But anyways, I post every Saturday. I hope to see you next Saturday. Thank you so much for sticking around, and above all, as always, stay creative.